Hey everybody, what's up? This is Ayvri in the air. Welcome back to the channel. Stoked you're here. Today, I figured I would make a kind of a new type of video. I want to go through a rad cross-country flight that I had yesterday here from Pine Mountain, and using a awesome piece of software as a tool that I think I can help kind of show you what I did well, what I did wrong, and give you some tips along the way. Hopefully that will help you in your cross-country flying. So it's going to be a long video, I think, but it'll be a good video, hopefully helpful. So subscribe to the channel. Here we go.
See ya.
Okay, so I'm just back from the second comp of the season. It was the second half of the national championships. It was in Chelan, Washington. It was the most competitive field that an American competition has ever seen. Pilots from all over the world and some really, really talented ones. I ended up coming in 15th, which was my best showing ever. I got 4th in one of the tasks, which was totally crazy. We're going to talk about that on a future episode. And I ended up 10th overall in the country, which blows my mind, and I'm so stoked on that, which gives me a PWC letter, so maybe I can go to the PWC in the future, which all this stuff is really exciting for me. And so I'd love to make more of my living through paragliding specifically, and my YouTube channel is a huge part of that. So if you like this channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. I have 3 different tiers, and the top tier, the new members of the top tier are going to receive in the mail one of these new Ayvri in the Air buffs. This one has all kinds of paragliding stuff on it. This one is the paraglider highliner skier. Okay. So go to patreon.com/Ayvri in the air. Consider becoming a patron. It really helps. I would love to do this stuff more full time, so I would love your support in that. So let's get right into this flight here. So yesterday, to start out, I will tell you that the forecast itself was gigantic. It was looking like lift to 16,000 feet, a 20% chance of overdevelopment. And so here I am on the southeast side about to launch, and here I go. I'm going to slow this down. This tool is called Ayvri, and this is a software that used to be called Duorama. And one of the developers of this program, his name is Mike, and he's an incredible paraglide pilot, turns out. So I have it at 8 times speed here so we can kind of see what's going on. I'm kind of scratching around the hill looking for it. And I think back here was my first mistake. Just two tips here right while we're looking at this, and we can talk about it. The biggest tip that I have for people new to cross country, I think the biggest tip I can give you is your launch timing. Like, you really have to time your launch properly. You need to wait for a cycle that is going to inflate your glider and make it nice to launch, but it's also not so strong. You also don't want to launch at the end of the cycle, and you don't really want to launch at the first puff of the cycle because you don't know what's there. You kind of want to wait until you feel a cycle coming and maybe launch like a third of the way into it or 25% of the way into the cycle, so that you know that as you fly out, the cycle can continue developing underneath you and take you up. If you mistime your launch, you're likely just to go down and land because you're launching into a lull cycle. So you want to launch into a thermic cycle. The second mistake that a lot of people make is that since we learn to paraglide soaring, we tend to try to soar. And that doesn't usually work. And even myself, I have thousands of cross-country hours. And you see over here, I flew and kind of found some lift, but then ended up turning back towards the hill. Here, I probably should have just flown out and kept flying higher and higher, because the thermals aren't going to be developed on the ground. It doesn't work like that. The thermals want to be column, so they're going to be away from the ground, okay? So as you can see here, I'm kind of like looking for it, finding a little bit of zeros and kind of humping some zeros. Nothing really productive. I find a couple little pieces of climb here. And what you're going to see is eventually I am going to get pretty much flush down the ridge here, find a little bit of climb. At this point, as I'm sinking, I'm cussing, and I think I screamed, "Damn it," and continue out, and then I find it. Okay, so of course, I find it here where the terrain is just starting. So all of this flat area in front is developing the thermal, and then the trigger here is out front. It's pretty obvious. And I find it, and we can speed up a little bit here, and it turns into a 4 meter a second climb here. We can look at these stats. The climb rate is currently in... So yeah, it becomes 3 meters a second, 4 meters a second, and I take it up to, I'm at 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet. So when I turn and go downwind, the glide was pretty good, but I know that there's probably something else here, and so I'm kind of waiting for it, looking for it. My friend Andy had launched, and he was out here near this like lava flow, and he had found a climb, and so I basically knew there was something else, so I kind of was sensitive, and here I found another climb that took me up to 11,123 feet was my max altitude for the day. The problem with this southeast launch on Pine Mountain is that it works so damn good that basically you can get boomed out of there and then fly out onto the flats when the flats aren't even working yet. Today, on a day like today, we got to launch and the wind was just cranking. The thermals were just like totally booming. And so we scrambled off the hill and kind of launched at like 11:25 or something when it really wasn't like super cranking out on the flats. So this glide was very peaceful, and eventually I kind of like found just a really light 1 meter a second climb that I think I took up something like 1,000 feet here. I'm at 7,700 feet. The ground is about 4,000 feet here, or 3,500 feet. Yeah, it looks like I found this light little climb. It was, just kind of and go on glide. Okay, at this point, I know that something's around here, and I found a couple of birds like swallows or swifts that were flapping but going up quite rapidly, and so you'll see that I kind of changed direction a couple of times trying to find this light little climb and trying to follow it, and then this is me following the bird and blah blah blah. Okay, but look at where I'm about to go. This is a crux here of the flight that I recognized. You can see below me here, this terrain is kind of like outcropping and small cliffs on all sides with green fields behind it. The wind was from the south here, so I'm going to the north, and I was hoping that the gradient between the green fields and the hot little mesa would trigger a thermal, so I kind of fly in that direction. This is a little farming community called Alfalfa, and so that little mesa didn't work, but as you can see, there's a little bit more terrain up here and a similar effect of the green fields with the hot rocks, and so I glide out over that, hoping that it's going to produce a thermal. It doesn't, and so basically at this point, downwind is going to be over all of the green fields, and so what I want to do here is I'm going to jump the green fields and get onto this hot desert juniper forest. Okay, it's called the Badlands. So I cross here, and now what I'm thinking, I'm at 4,900 feet. I'm like, what is pretty low, especially for around here and the time of day. And so what I'm going to do, what I decide to do here is instead of pushing deep onto the desert, which I think will produce, but there's really no great places to land. These trees are junipers, so they're only like 20 feet tall at the most, but it's easy to get your glider caught in them, and you'll have to walk in sand on the way out and yada, yada, yada. So I figured I would just follow the line between the green grass fields and the desert juniper forest. So I do that, and I'm following it, and I'm just getting lower and lower, and it's not working. And my best friend Matt calls me, and I'm on speakerphone, and I put my glove in my mouth, and I'm saying, I'm low in alfalfa. I think I'm probably going to land. And so here you can see at this point, I'm heading to the green grass fields, right? And I start kind of downwinding a little bit, and I feel my glide flattening out. at this point right here, I can feel my glide flattening. I literally feel it. I don't even have to look at my vari. I can just see, because I'm so close to the ground, I can just see how my glide is changing. And so I start following that, and I just take it downwind. And at this point, I'm kind of like nervous because the landing options aren't great, and I'm kind of getting too far from the green grass fields to land there. But I end up finding light climb, and I frisbee in it, and I'm climbing. Oh my God, I'm climbing out. I'm freaking climbing out. I just had that's the lowest save of my life. It was less than 200 feet off the ground. Just so sick. So at this point, I'm really like so stoked that I'm climbing out of here, and I just can't really believe it. Over to the east from here, I can see a fully developed, mature dust devil that's like, 500 or 1,000 feet tall. And so I kind of start going that way. You'll see in this climb, the wind direction shifts. So I'm in a west wind here, and now I'm in kind of an east wind. And this is going to make the thermals really difficult to track today. And that's something that you'll see as we continue this flight. So I basically am very patient in this climb. The tip that I will give you here when you're in a low save, in a light climb, is a couple things. One, you really want to make flat turns, not just so that you won't lose altitude in your turn, but so that you'll track the thermal and so that you'll stay with the thermal. If you imagine a plastic bag, the plastic bag is just going to let itself be drawn to wherever the air is taking it, and your paraglider isn't that. Your paraglider can go places. So you really want to turn your paraglider into a fucking plastic bag. I know it's kind of weird to think, but you really want to just let the air take you where it's going to take you. And sometimes that's going to be through strong lift, and sometimes that's going to be just through zeros downwind into the next piece of climb. So really flat turns are the efficient way, as well as the way that allows your glider to be entrained into the air mass that you're in, So finally, it's I'm just getting up here, and I don't get much over 6,000 feet, which, I don't know, is enough to put my gloves away at least. So my next move here is to glide downwind. Oh, I get 6,300 feet, 6,400 feet, 65, 66, okay. Yep, that's it. Okay, so at this point, I basically am looking around. I'm not sure what my next move is here, but this is Powell Butte, and this is a place that I've always wanted to fly, but have never flown. I have flown most of the buttes in Central Oregon. Remember, I was born and raised here. This is my home, and I've never flown this damn butte. It's got private property all around it, and so it's really difficult for us to access. We can't really access any of the launchable aspects. And so here I fly. This is a golf resort under me. This is called Brasada, and it's super ritzy. And so I'm okay, at least I can land next to the pool if I have to get a lot of applause, and I'm sure someone will buy me a beer. But I just try to chase it onto the terrain here, and you'll see a couple of times, we'll slow this down, I find lift, and I kind of turn, and then it's just gone. And so there's some bubbles happening here, and also the wind is literally 180 degrees of how I glided. I glided in a south wind, I arrive here to northwest wind, west wind, and it's really quite tricky. So I basically just had one of the lowest saves of my life on the flat, and now I'm pasted to terrain trying to find it once again. So I'll speed it up to 16 times here, and we can see that I get a couple of strong climbs that are kind of broken, and I try to follow them downwind. I think in reality right here, you'll see this climb. I think I probably could have taken that downwind, but I'm reluctant to go too far downwind here because I'm low, and if I fall out of it behind it, and then I'll have a hard time pushing back into the wind onto the face of terrain that's releasing. So I kind of am waiting for something to feel consolidated enough that I'll actually take it downwind, and I'm not quite finding that here. And so this is basically my 45-minute get stuck on Powell Butte, which is, it's bittersweet because like I said, I really have wanted to fly here for a long time, and it's cool that I arrived here off of a cross country from Pine Mountain. So I basically am really low to the terrain. I'm not kicking treetops, but I'm lowest that it might even work. And so I'm fitzing around, and you can see that I just do lap after lap after lap, and finally I just I keep doing laps, and finally I kind of find something and go up 200 feet, down 200 feet, and then now I do another lap, and finally, maybe, is this the one? Is this the one? And it's kind of zeros, and then, is this the one? Zeros. Okay, maybe a one. Check me out. Yep, I'm going back. Yep, there, I found it. Okay, so it's basically like a low save on terrain. Remember, it's like you're not always going to find the climb. A lot of times you'll need to find a bubble that will take you to a bubble that will take you to the bottom of the scrappy climb that will turn into the climb. So be patient, connect the bubbles, transition well from pieces of lift. This is what a good cross-country pilot will do, is transition between pieces of lift. So transitioning well, and I find it, and I climb out for a ways, and like I said, the wind, that's a west wind that I just drifted in, and then I'm going to climb some more. I'm going to push over to the summit of the butte, and then I know it's around here somewhere, so I push around until I finally find it. And look at that. Now I'm in an east wind. I'm thermally in an east wind. So the changing wind direction is a difficult thing to track the thermals. And so I top this climb out. I'm at 9,300 feet. And this right here is going to be one of the better glides of my life, because I've grown up here. Literally, as you can see, I'm flying towards Smith Rock over here, Smith Rock State Park, which I have a deep history at as a highliner. I've established a ton of highlines there. That's where I cut my teeth as a highliner and a rope jumper and a climber and all these different things. My great-grandparents homesteaded just on the west side of Smith Rock in Terrebonne. And so from Powell Butte, I'm going to glide all the fucking way to Terrebonne, which is just mind-boggling. And if you see, my glide is just crazy good. I'm getting like a 20 plus to 1 glide ratio. I'm going down at 0.7 meters a second at 70 kilometers an hour. And just my glide is so freaking good. And I just cover a huge part of Central Oregon in a single freaking glide. I eat 2 snacks. I just check out the views. I have the Redmond Airport Class B airspace just 200 meters to my left. So I'm not breaking the rules, but I'm pretty damn close. It's just so beautiful. The glide is way too peaceful. On both sides, there's like an overdevelopment in the mountains and overdevelopment to my east. And so somehow I'm like flying this blue line. I'm going to fly onto this piece of terrain in front of me here, and I'm going to make a couple of mistakes here, and this is where my flight is going to begin to end. And so I want to tell you what my mistakes were and tell you how I think I could have made them better. So as you can see here, on both sides of this, there are gravel pits. There's a gravel pit here, and there's a gravel pit here. I tend to find that gravel pits fucking work good because there's no vegetation. There's like the terrain can't do anything with the energy except for release it. So it tends to boost here. So right as expected, before I even get there, it goes up the strongest piece of climb of the day, and I find a 5 meter a second, but it doesn't take me up very high, and the wind direction is shifting, and it's very difficult to track. And here I'm at almost 6,000 feet, and I make a mistake here, and I'll show you what it is. Okay, so I got that one piece of climb, and here, another one, and this is kind of more on the face that I thought it should be working, but at this point I leave. What I should have done here is I should have followed this terrain. If we flatten this out, you can see that there's a big piece of terrain here going to the north, and I should have just followed it because I know that it's one of these pieces of terrain. Like if there was a 5 meter a second climb out front, like some piece of this is gonna have more climb, and I need more altitude. I'm only at 6,000 feet here. I should have followed that terrain. This is Pine Ridge here. This is a paragliding site to my north, and Gray Butte, I've launched off of there. That was my first 100 miler. So I know that the terrain around here works, and I kind of, at this point, got a little bit impatient. And if you look over here, this is Smith Rock State Park. This is like my prize. I really wanted to like fly up and over Smith Rock and continue to the north. So I let myself leave this climb, and I start this glide across the valley, and I just get fucking drilled by huge sink. So I race full speed, and I make this valley crossing, and I just end up arriving very low onto the next piece of terrain. So what I'm doing here, and this is another mistake that I make, is that, like I said about the plastic bag, like you really gotta like turn flat turns and don't change directions so that you can just even track it in your mind. Because continuing to turn flat and continuing to do, continuing to turn is really like how you track light climbs. And so there you can see I change direction and I lose it a bit and I go back, and I'm actually making progress here. It's like the climb is very light, but it's like it's working. And what I needed to do was stay on it. I think I made a mistake by gliding onto this piece of terrain as opposed to this one. I knew that I could have glided onto this piece of terrain over here, and I should have done that because it had a more steady slope. It was steeper and it was also taller. So if I could have just scratched up it, I could have scratched up it taller. Whereas this one is really flat here, and I can't really glide back onto here because I can't glide back out of there low. So I made a mistake as to where I was going to glide onto. I was really hoping to glide up onto this piece, which is Burma Ridge. But at any rate, I am impatient, and look, this is my big mistake. This house here had flags, and so I could see that the wind was coming from the east, which meant that I needed to stay on this east-facing slope, but instead I mistakenly head to the south, and I take a lap to hopefully find better climb, and I don't, and I lose 500 feet, and I got to come around low, and this almost works here. I can almost scratch out of here, but not quite, and so I end up just pushing out onto their perfectly green grass field and having a safe landing. My dad picked me up just minutes after I packed up. So that was my flight. That was 75K in 3 hours, a couple of really low saves, a couple of really cool experiences, and one of the best glides of my life, covering a lot of Central Oregon. I hope that's interesting and helpful. If you have questions about my decision-making here, put them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer those. Like I said, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. That's patreon.com/airyintheair, or make a one-time donation at paypal.me/airyintheair. All that stuff super helps and enriches my life, and hopefully I can make paragliding my full-time gig here on YouTube and bring you guys a bunch of content. This is Ayvri. I'm going to be using this moving forward to dissect my flights and hopefully show you guys what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about so that you can improve your cross-country game, your thermaling game. So hope it helps. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe, leave a comment, share this with your friends, and we'll see you on the next episode. See ya.